We were having dinner at a fancy place downtown when Marcus excused himself to take a call. The second he walked away, this grandmother at the table beside me leaned over fast. She pushed a roll of money into my purse and whispered real quiet, "Leave right now through the back door. Get a taxi. Don't wait for him." I almost didn't make it out alive myself. Hello friends. Welcome back. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for Jamal's stories and give us a thumbs up. Now let's get into it. But let me tell you how everything started. Before that scary moment, the night had been beautiful. Felt like a dream come true. Maya Torres, that's me, sat in the fanciest restaurant I'd ever been inside. I'm 36 years old, and I finally felt like my life was coming together. My husband Marcus Webb sat across from me. Husband. That word still felt brand new in my mouth. We got married at the courthouse just 2 weeks ago, and I still couldn't believe it was real. Maya, why do you keep smiling like that? Marcus asked. His eyes looked warm under the pretty lights hanging from the ceiling. Did I say something funny? No, I said, shaking my head and drinking my fizzy juice. The bubbles tickled my tongue. I'm just looking at you and thinking about how lucky I am. And that was the total truth. After my parents died 3 years ago, I had nobody. I had my job at the flower store where I was the main flower person and everyone's friend. I had my parents' old apartment, a cozy little place in an older building near the city center. But when nighttime came, that apartment felt so quiet and empty it hurt my ears. Then Marcus showed up. He was tall, handsome, 40 years old, with some gray hair on the sides that made him look really smart. He walked into my flower shop to buy flowers for his mom and just stayed to talk. We started dating really fast, but it felt so normal, like we'd known each other forever. He was so nice to me, not bringing me basic roses but bringing me sunflowers because he knew that meant more to someone who works with flowers all day. He listened when I talked about my parents, my job, my dreams from when I was little. He seemed so solid, so honest. I'm the lucky one, Marcus said back, putting his hand on top of mine. His hand felt warm and strong. Finding a woman like you today is really special. My mother talks about you all the time. She keeps asking when we'll finally move your stuff to our new place together. I laughed. They joked about calling their future home together their family castle. It was a nice 2-bedroom apartment that Marcus would move them into soon. Right now he still lived with his mother, Patricia Webb, a woman everyone in the city respected. She had a big important job at City Hall and seemed very calm and powerful. I liked her a lot too. Patricia welcomed me right away with hugs and motherly kindness. The waiter, a young man who stood perfectly straight, filled our glasses again. The restaurant boss, a big man in his 50s, had already come to our table twice to make sure everything was good. He only talked to Marcus, calling him by name and looking at him like he was really important. Marcus acted like this was normal. He knew how to make people notice him. You know, I talked to my mother earlier, he said, taking a drink of his wine. She's so happy for us. She thinks I finally settled down and that you're the best thing that ever happened to me. Hearing that made me feel really good inside. I knew Marcus had girlfriends before me, but he never talked much about them. Just said they weren't right for each other, and I didn't need those details. The past was the past. What mattered was that he was with me now. Suddenly his phone buzzed in his suit pocket. Marcus pulled it out, looked at the screen, and a little flash of annoyance crossed his face. Forgive me, honey, he said, standing up. That's work. Very pushy people. I'll just go to the lobby for literally 2 minutes. It's quieter out there. Go ahead and order dessert. Get your favorite, the one with the strawberries. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and quickly walked toward the exit. I watched him go, noticing how smoothly he moved, how expensive his suit looked. I smiled to myself again. Everything felt right. Everything felt good. I looked around the room. Rich people eating, soft music playing, the quiet sound of glasses clinking. At the table right next to mine, really close, sat an old lady all by herself. She wasn't really eating, just stirring her cup of tea with a spoon, and for some reason she kept staring hard at me. I smiled at her politely, But she didn't smile back. Her face looked kind of familiar. Where had I seen her before? And then it came to me. Course. She was a regular customer from the flower shop. The sweet old lady who always bought yellow daisies and who all us girls secretly called Daisy Dorothy behind her back. Dorothy Mills, I think her name was. She was always so sweet, quiet, always said thank you and wished us a nice day. But right now she looked totally different. The moment I recognized her, the old woman seemed like she'd been waiting for that exact second. She looked fast toward the exit where Marcus had gone, leaned hard on the table, and stood up slowly. She took 2 steps toward my table and bent down really close to me. She smelled like flowers and fear. "Sweetheart, listen real close," she whispered, and her voice was shaking. Her face looked white as paper, and there was such big scary fear in her eyes that I got chills down my back. The woman reached into her old purse, pulled something out, and pushed it hard into my hand. It was a thick bunch of money wrapped tight with a rubber band. "He's a monster," the old woman said, breathing hard. Her cold fingers grabbed my hand like a clamp. "My girl married him. She's not here anymore. You understand? She's gone. She disappeared. Quick, call a taxi right now and run out through the window in the bathroom. Run, sweetheart, run." Froze completely. I sat there shocked with the bundle of money in my hand, unable to say a single word. What crazy talk was this? What daughter? Was the woman just confused? Did she think I was someone else? "I think you have the wrong person," I said, my voice coming out weird. "No," the old woman said, breathing out, with tears filling up her eyes. "I'm not wrong. Run." She let go of my hand, turned around fast, and shuffled toward the exit. I stayed sitting there, staring after her. My brain felt totally mixed up. Was this some sick joke? A trick? But the money in my hand was real, and the terror in the woman's eyes was completely real. I looked up and saw the restaurant entrance. And right then my heart jumped, then started beating crazy fast. Standing in the doorway were 2 men. 2 huge bald guys wearing dark, ugly leather jackets that looked totally wrong with a fancy restaurant. They weren't looking for a table. They slowly, like hunters, looked around the room, and their eyes landed on me. They were staring right at Maya. I had never seen these men before in my life. Marcus had mentioned cousins, but these guys didn't look like family at all. The danger wasn't just the confused talk of a crazy old woman anymore. It became real. It stood 30 feet away and looked me in the eye. I stopped thinking. My gut feeling screamed louder than any smart thought. I jumped up, grabbed my bag, stuffed the money inside, and knocking over a chair, ran toward the hallway where the bathrooms were. I heard someone gasp in surprise behind me. I didn't care. The ladies' bathroom. I flew inside, locked the heavy door, and leaned my back against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. What was happening here? Oh my gosh, what was happening here? Taxi. A window. The old woman's words hammered against my head. I pulled my phone from my bag. My hands shook so bad I dropped it a few times on the tile floor before I could press the taxi app. Address. What address? Not home. Definitely not. To the shop, to work. The only place I felt safe. While the app looked for a car, I looked around. The window was small, cloudy glass, right up near the ceiling. I climbed onto the marble sink counter to look out. My heart dropped. The window had thick metal bars stuck into the wall. My escape way was blocked. A message popped up on my phone. A blue Toyota license number 892 was coming. The car would be here in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I jumped down to the floor. Had to use the main door. No matter what those 2 guys were doing, I would break through, run onto the street, get in the car and drive away. I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and turned toward the door. But as I reached to unlock it and open it, I saw someone standing in the doorway, blocking the whole exit. Standing there, the restaurant boss, Victor Webb, the same man who had smiled so kindly at Marcus just 10 minutes ago. Now there wasn't even a tiny bit of friendliness on his face. He looked at me cold, with clear hate in his eyes. "Excuse me, I need to get out," I said quietly, trying to move around him. "I'm afraid you'll have to wait a minute." he said in a calm, uncaring voice, not moving at all. And then, from the hallway behind his back, I heard Marcus's quiet, painfully familiar voice. "It's okay, Mr. Webb. My wife is just a little upset, tired after a long week. I'll talk to her myself." The manager nodded silently, stepped back from the doorway into the hall, and pulled the door closed. Maya heard the most horrible sound of her life. A dry metal click. The sound of a key turning in the lock from the other side. She was locked in. She was trapped. And outside the door, she could already hear the footsteps of her husband getting closer. I grabbed at the handle once, twice. The door wouldn't move. Heavy wood. It had become a prison wall, and beyond it, Marcus's voice, so calm, so reasonable, like soothing a fussy child. "Maya, please open up. What happened? You scared me, Mr. Webb. Don't worry. She just has a headache. She acts like this sometimes. I'll calm her down right away." Headache. He was lying. He was lying so easily and naturally that cold sweat ran down my back. This man, my husband, was a complete stranger to me. Everything I knew about him, all that warmth, care, tenderness, it was all fake. The truth was the locked door, the bald guys in the dining room, and the icy terror in the old woman's eyes. Panic started flooding my brain, taking my breath away. I looked around the bathroom again. White tiles, gold faucets, a huge mirror showing a pale, confused woman with wild eyes. That wasn't me. Couldn't be me. Maya Torres, the main flower person, the calm, sensible Maya, who knew how to handle every difficult flower and every picky customer. I didn't get into these kinds of situations. This only happened in bad TV shows. I had to do something. Think. The window was barred. The door was locked. Screaming. Calling for help. But who? The manager was working with Marcus. The restaurant customers would only hear his concerned voice explaining that his wife had a headache. If I started screaming and banging on the door, everyone would think I was just being crazy. They would drag me away by those so-called bald cousins, put me into a car. And I didn't want to imagine what would happen then. My eyes darted over the walls, searching for anything, any help. And I saw it. On the wall next to the door hung a small red box with a black button under glass. The fire alarm. For a second I hesitated. This would be a huge scene, a false alarm. But then I realized my life was already a scene, and this alarm was the only thing that could save me. The decision happened instantly, throwing away all doubt. I wouldn't be a victim just waiting for something bad to happen. I would act. I ripped my bag from my shoulder, heavy with a massive metal buckle. I swung with all my strength and hit the glass with the buckle. The glass didn't break. It only got covered with cracks like a spider web. "Maya, what are you doing?" Marcus's voice behind the door got sharper. "Stop right now. You're embarrassing me." Embarrassing him. I was losing everything beneath my feet, and he was worried about looking bad. The anger gave me power. I hit again and again. On the third hit, the thin glass broke into tiny pieces. Without waiting even 1 second, I pushed the big red button. Right then, the world exploded in noise. A super loud, broken siren screamed through the room, making my ears hurt. It howled and wailed, bouncing off the tile walls and filling up the whole space. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Behind the door there were angry words. "What the heck?" the manager yelled. She set off the alarm. "Calm down. Everything is fine," Marcus shouted, trying to talk over the siren's scream. "It's a false alarm. My wife." But nobody was listening to him anymore. In the hallway there were fast footsteps, scared women screaming, total chaos. That was my chance. And then a new smell joined the screaming siren, a sharp, bitter smell of smoke. It was coming from the air vent somewhere. Apparently something had burned in the kitchen from all the confusion. But for me, this smoke was a real gift from heaven. The panic in the restaurant reached its highest point. Now nobody doubted that the alarm was real. "Open up, you fool!" someone shouted at the manager. "We have a room full of people." I heard the key grind in the lock again. I stepped back, fists ready, prepared to run. The door flew open. Standing in the doorway, red with anger, was the manager. Behind him, waiters ran around and guests screamed. He tried to say something to me, to grab me, but I didn't give him the chance. I shoved him aside with all my strength and burst into the hallway. The dining room was complete craziness. People were jumping up from tables, knocking over chairs and glasses. Women pressed napkins to their faces. The light smoke that had only been a smell in the bathroom had already turned into a thin fog hanging under the ceiling. I saw Marcus. He was standing in the middle of the room, looking around confused. He was looking for me. Our eyes met for just a tiny second. In his look there was no warmth or shame, only cold, calculating anger. He saw me and took a step in my direction, but it was already too late. I dove into the crowd, rushing toward the exit, not caring about my path. I pushed and used my elbows to get forward, ignoring angry shouts. "Excuse me, let me through, please." Just outside into the air. I ran down the big staircase and breathed in deeply the cold fall air. The siren kept screaming. Somewhere far away the sound of a fire truck could already be heard. I didn't wait. I ran down the steps and along the street, away from that cursed restaurant. I didn't look back. I knew if I turned around I would see him and my legs would just stop working. I ran for 1 block before I let myself stop. I turned the corner, leaned against a cold brick wall, and tried to catch my breath, choking with sobs. My phone in my hand vibrated. A message from the taxi service. A blue Toyota was waiting for me. I looked around and saw it by the road a little further down the street. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired look, looked at me with surprise as I jumped into the back seat. "Young lady, are you okay? You look like you're running from something." "I'm fine," I gasped. "Please drive faster." I gave him the address of the flower shop. The car pulled away. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The rush of energy started to go away, replaced by an icy emptiness. Who was Marcus? What did he want? And most importantly, what had happened to the daughter of the old woman, Dorothy? "She's not here anymore." Those words echoed in my mind like a dull, terrible sound. I stayed quiet the whole ride, watching the lights of the night city pass by the window. Automatically I pulled the roll of money Dorothy had given me from my bag, counted out what I needed, and handed it to the driver when we stopped in front of the shop. "Keep the change." I jumped out of the car and froze before the familiar door. Maya's flowers. My world, my safe place. Every vase, every ribbon, every flower here had been chosen and arranged by me. With shaking hands I pulled the keys from my pocket, taking a long time to get them in the keyhole. Finally the lock clicked. Inside it smelled like dirt, roses, and daisies, a familiar, homey smell. I stepped in, locked the door with all the locks, and turned on the dim light in the back room. This was my real hideout. A small couch, an old table, my laptop, and a water heater. I sank onto the couch, and for the first time that night I started shaking really bad. I had to calm down, pull myself together. I sat like that, hugging myself for about 10 minutes until the shaking got a little better. What now? Go to the police. And what would I tell them? Hello, my husband locked me in a restaurant bathroom, and an old woman gave me money and told me to run. They would laugh at me, tell me it was just a marriage fight, saying, "Deal with it yourself." I only had the cash Dorothy had given me. All my savings, everything I had saved over years, was in my bank account. I urgently needed to protect it, move it to another account, another card, anywhere so Marcus couldn't touch it. I didn't know if he could, but after tonight I was ready for anything. I turned on my old work laptop. It hummed for a long time, taking forever to start up. I opened my bank's website, typed in my username and password. My fingers didn't work right. I had to try it several times. Finally I was in my personal area. For a second I felt relief. There was my account. All the money was there, down to the last penny. I opened the transfer section and picked the option to move to another card. I still had an old payment card I hadn't used in forever, but it still worked. I typed in the number, the amount, everything down to the last penny. Confirmation text message came to my phone. I entered the code in the right spot and pressed transfer. A spinning wheel appeared on the screen, turning and turning. I held my breath. Suddenly the wheel disappeared and a red message popped up on the screen instead. A small, neat window with a few lines of words. Transaction denied. Your accounts have been temporarily frozen due to a report of suspicious activity. The report was filed by your lawful husband, Marcus Webb. I stared at the laptop screen. The red letters of the message glowed in the half-darkness of the back room, burning the words into my brain. Lawful husband. That word that had seemed so warm and safe just an hour ago was now a brand, a steel trap snapping shut on my life. He had thought of everything, planned everything. While I sat happy and unsuspecting in the restaurant, he had already acted. He didn't just want to scare me or hold me back. He wanted to destroy me, take everything from me. I frantically closed the message and tried to do the transfer again. Again I entered the card number, the amount, the text message code, and again the same red banner. Transaction denied. The coldness that had only touched my skin before now went inside me, freezing all my insides. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was frozen solid. The flower shop wasn't safe anymore. He knew this place. He knew I would run here. It was the second place after home where I felt protected. So he would come here or send his cousins. I had to leave right now. But where to? Only one address stayed in my mind. A place he couldn't take from me. My apartment. My parents' apartment. My fortress. He could block my money, but he couldn't take the walls I had grown up in. I turned off the laptop, tucked it into my bag along with Dorothy's roll of cash, put on my coat, and slipped out onto the street, turning the key twice in the lock of my beloved shop. The nighttime city was empty and cold. I called another taxi, trying not to look around, jumping at every passing car. As the car drove me through the familiar streets, pictures of the past few weeks raced through my mind. Here Marcus helped me paint the bedroom. There we laughed together, picking out a new table. Here he brought me coffee in bed last Sunday. Each of those pictures, so warm and real, was now poisoned. Everything had been part of the plan. Every move, every word, every smile, everything was a calculated lie leading up to tonight. The taxi turned onto my street. The old 5-story building, the big tree by the entrance, all so familiar, so painfully known. I paid and jumped out without waiting for the driver to wish me good night. My heart pounded in my chest, but now it wasn't just panic. It was hope. Soon I would go into my apartment, lock myself in with all the locks, and be safe. And tomorrow I would figure something out. I ran up the stairs to my 3rd floor unit. There it was. The brown fake leather door, number 27, my door. I fumbled in my bag and found the keys. My fingers wouldn't listen to me. The key ring fell to the floor with a loud clang. The echo bounced through the quiet stairwell. I quickly picked them up, picked the right key, and put it in the keyhole. The key wouldn't go in. I pulled it out, flipped it over, and tried again. Same thing. It only went about half an inch deep and hit something hard, like something was stuck in the lock. I tried the second lower lock. Same story. It couldn't be true. Just couldn't be. I pushed the key into both locks again and again with growing fear, uselessly. A wild thought shot through my mind. Had someone stuck something in the locks? But why? The panic I had almost beaten came back even stronger. I started to knock, first quietly, then louder and louder. Open up. Please open up. No answer. I listened. No sound. Then I started hitting the door with my fists and feet. Open up. This is my apartment. I live here. My scream was full of desperation. Right then the lock on the opposite landing clicked and a door opened just a little. Standing in the doorway was Ramona Davis, the neighbor I had known since I was a kid. Maya, is that you? What happened? Honey, why are you yelling? Ramona Davis, I can't get into my home, I gasped, turning to her. The locks, they won't open. And just then the door to my apartment slowly opened. But standing there wasn't Marcus or a police officer. Standing there was a completely strange woman in her 50s wearing a faded bathrobe and worn slippers. Her hair was messily tied up in a bun, and her face showed extreme annoyance. Behind her it smelled like fried fish. "What do you want?" she asked rudely, looking me up and down. "Why are you making such noise in the whole building? Have you looked at the time?" Froze. I just stood there staring at the woman standing in the doorway of my apartment. My home. I couldn't say a single word. The air went out. I live here," I finally whispered. "What?" the woman laughed. "I rent here." "And who are you?" "I don't know you." Right then other doors in the stairwell started to open. Old Mr. Nelson from the 5th floor peeked out and the young couple from the 4th. Everyone watched what was happening with curiosity. And then footsteps and voices were heard from below on the stairs. I turned around. 2 people were coming up the steps. Marcus and his mother Patricia Webb. Marcus looked concerned and distressed. Patricia Webb was as always the picture of calmness and dignity. A sad concern was written on her face. "Please excuse the noise," Marcus said, talking to all the neighbors at the same time. His voice was calm and convincing. "Maya is a bit overwhelmed. Overworked. A nervous breakdown. We were just coming to pick her up and bring her home." Patricia Webb stepped toward me and gently took my arm. Her fingers were ice cold. "My dear Maya, come on. You don't have to make a scene. Come with us. You'll rest. Everything will be okay. We are only trying to help you." The neighbors who had been watching with confusion now traded knowing looks. Course. Patricia Webb, a respected woman, deputy chair of the city housing department. She couldn't lie. And Maya, yes, she had been a bit nervous lately. Probably really a breakdown. The looks they gave me changed. There was pity and suspicion in them. "This is my apartment," I screamed, tearing my arm away. "From my parents. What is this woman doing here?" "Maya, my dear, you must be confused about something," Ramona Davis said gently but firmly, stepping out of her apartment. "You yourself said you were having problems, money troubles. It's probably embarrassing for you, Maya, to accuse such a respected woman as Mrs. Webb. She only wants to help you." Marcus sighed sadly as if it hurt him deeply to have to explain all this. "Ramona, you're right. Maya had some money difficulties. To prevent bill collectors from taking her apartment, we temporarily transferred the rights to my mother. It's just a business thing to protect her property. And while we solved the problems, my mother officially rented the apartment to this woman so it wouldn't stand empty. Everything is completely legal." The woman in the bathrobe immediately agreed. Yes, I rent from Mrs. Webb. Have a contract. All official." This was such an outrageous, bold lie that I was temporarily stunned. What bill collectors? What money troubles? "You're all lying," I screamed, my voice cracking. Marcus looked at me with deep sadness. Then he turned to his mother. "Mom, I didn't want to do this in front of everyone, but I guess I have to. She leaves me no choice." He calmly opened the expensive leather folder he held and pulled out a neat paper holder. From the holder he took out a document, an official form, several stapled sheets. "Here," he said, holding the document so all the neighbors could see the notarized sales contract. He walked up to me and unfolded the last page in front of my face. "Look, Maya, you simply forgot." I lowered my eyes and saw it. At the bottom of the page, beneath the lines of official words, was my signature. Clear, sweeping, painfully familiar. "Torres, Maya." And right then a memory flashed through my mind. 2 days ago in the evening we were sitting on the couch with Marcus watching a movie. He came to me with a stack of papers. "Sweetheart, this is for the bills, for the registration, lots of paperwork after the wedding. I need your signature in a few places so I can run to the offices myself without bothering you." Had been happy. I had trusted him. Without looking, I had signed everything he had put in front of me at the marked spots. The signature wasn't fake. I myself had signed the death sentence with my own hand. I had given this man my home. The paper was right in front of my face. I stared at my signature, at those familiar handwritten letters, and the world around me stopped existing. The sounds disappeared. The judging whispers of the neighbors, the sympathetic voice of Patricia Webb, the disapproving sniff of the woman in the bathrobe. All of it became a distant, unclear buzz like the sound of the ocean in a seashell. I only saw my signature. The signature that had crossed out my entire life. I myself had given them my home with my own hands, with a smile on my face. "See, darling," Marcus's voice broke through the ringing silence in my head. "You just forgot. Overwork. No problem. Come with us, have some tea, get some rest, and everything will be fine." Patricia Webb took my arm again. This time her grip wasn't gentle. It was iron. It was the grip of a jail guard. "Come, Maya. Don't be stubborn." And right then her frozen state gave way. It was replaced by animal basic fear. Going with them into their house after all that had happened. Dorothy's words from the restaurant, "My girl married him. She's not here anymore," struck my head like a hammer. If I went with them now, I wouldn't be here either. I tore myself away with all my strength, ripping my arm free from Patricia Webb's iron grip. "Don't touch me," I screamed, backing away toward the stair railing. My movement was so sudden that both Marcus and his mother were confused for a second. That second was enough for me. I turned and rushed down the stairs, ignoring the steps, jumping over 2 steps at a time, holding onto the cold railing. "Maya, stop!" Marcus yelled after me. In his voice there was no more fake concern, only an ugly, commanding snarl. I said stop. I didn't listen. I ran past my floor, past the second, past the first. I heard them starting to pound upstairs as they started to chase. The heavy front door closed before my nose. I pushed it open with all my strength and stumbled out onto the street into the damp night chill. I ran without looking back. I didn't know where, only forward, away from that yard, away from those windows that had been my home just this morning. The wind hit my face. Tears blurred my eyes and mixed with the light rain. I ran several blocks until my lungs burned. Only then did I stop, hide in a dark alley between the buildings, and slide down the wall, choking on sobs. I had nothing left. No home, no money, no husband who it turned out I had never known. I was alone in this huge cold city, embarrassed in front of my neighbors, painted as a crazy person, homeless. I sat in that alley for maybe an hour, shaking from the cold and despair. Slowly the crying stopped, leaving behind only a dull, nagging pain. I had to do something. I couldn't stay on the street. I remembered the money in my bag. Dorothy's money. The only thing I had left. Pulled out my phone. The screen was wet with rain. Where should I go? Hotel was too expensive. I didn't know how long I would have to make this money last. I searched the internet for cheap hostel. The phone showed several addresses. One was sort of close at the other end of downtown. I called a taxi, tried to speak as calmly as possible, and stepped out onto the street into the icy wind. The hostel turned out to be a run-down place with a worn-out sign. Inside it smelled like dampness and cleaner. A sleepy person at the desk took the money for one night without asking many questions and gave me the key to a tiny room with an iron bed and a nightstand. The window faced the blank wall of the neighboring building, but I didn't care. There were walls here and a lock on the door. I locked myself in, sat down on the squeaky bed, and pulled out my phone again. I scrolled through my contacts, not knowing who to call. Friend. What would I tell them? That my husband was a fraud who had taken my apartment 2 weeks after the wedding. They wouldn't believe me. They would think I had gone crazy just like the neighbors. Work. My boss, a strict and decent man, wouldn't tolerate such drama. And then my finger stopped on a name in the phone book. Dorothy Mills. Daisy Dorothy. I had saved her number a few months ago when Dorothy called to order a bouquet for her neighbor's birthday party. The only person in the entire world who knew the truth. The only one who had tried to warn me. I pressed the call button. My heart hammered. What if she didn't pick up? What if all this had just been a strange impulse and now she didn't want to talk to me anymore? After a few long rings, a quiet, shaky voice answered on the other end. Hello. Dorothy Mills, I whispered, my voice breaking. This is Maya from the flower shop. Silence hung on the other end of the line. For a second I thought the connection had been cut. Sweetheart, finally, Dorothy said, and there was so much relief in her voice that tears filled up my eyes again. "You're alive. Where are you? Are you okay?" "No," I gasped. "I'm not okay at all." I told her everything, stopping and crying in a few words about the blocked accounts, the changed locks, the woman in the bathrobe, and the sales contract with my own signature. Dorothy listened quietly without interrupting me. When I finished, she only said 3 words, but she said them in such a firm and convincing tone that a tiny spark of hope lit up in me. "Give me the address. I'm coming." 40 minutes later, there was a quiet knock on the door of my shabby room. It was Dorothy. She stepped in, looked over the room, then looked at me, and without a word she just walked over and hugged me. And in that motherly awkward hug there was more warmth and caring than in all of Marcus's words over the last month. "Come to my place," she said. "You don't belong here." Dorothy's apartment was small, modest, but very clean and cozy. Smelled like herbs and old books. Many photos hung on the walls, mainly of the same young woman with big, bright eyes and a kind smile. In one photo she had braids and a bow. In another she wore a graduation gown. In a third she was laughing with a huge bouquet of yellow daisies in her hands. "That's Sarah," Dorothy said softly when she noticed my gaze. "My daughter." She led me into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and got jam from the cupboard. I sat at the table, silent. I couldn't take my eyes off Sarah's portrait, which hung directly across from me. "She loved your shop very much," Dorothy began, pouring tea into the cups. "She said you were the only one who had the freshest flowers and the finest taste. That you weren't just a salesperson but a real artist. That's why I recognized you immediately. Not you me, but me you." Dorothy sat down opposite me. Her face was drawn. Deep shadows lay under her eyes. "What happened to you is almost the same thing that happened to her. 1 for 1. He also appeared so suddenly, charming, attentive. After 3 months he asked her to marry him. Sarah had her own place, a small studio apartment her grandmother had left her. A month after the wedding he talked her into signing the apartment over to him. He said it would be easier that way to get a bigger loan for a shared family home. That it was just paperwork. She believed him. She loved him. Dorothy fell silent, taking a sip of tea. Her hands were trembling. And another month later they were supposedly out on a boat. That's what he said. Storm came up. The boat flipped over. Sarah couldn't swim well. He said he tried to save her but couldn't. They found him on the shore, shocked and freezing. They found her 2 days later. The police said it was an accident. "Oh my gosh," was all I could whisper. "He was such a sad widower," Dorothy said with bitter anger. "Everyone felt sorry for him. The apartment went to him as the only heir. He sold it 3 weeks after the funeral. And I didn't believe him for a second. I started secretly investigating, slowly, gathering information. And I understood that my Sarah wasn't the last one. When I saw him next to you in your shop, I knew you were next. I followed you, waited for a moment. And when I saw you in the restaurant today, I knew it was my only chance to warn you." I sat there stunned. Sarah's story was my story. Only my ending, the one with the boat and the accident, was still missing. "But how?" I whispered. "How do they pull this off? These documents, the notary, it all looks so legal. They must have connections, some protectors." Dorothy looked at me with a long, heavy gaze. "Protectors. That's exactly the point. He is not alone. He's just the bait, the handsome face. The entire operation is run by his mother, Patricia Webb." I could hardly believe it. "But she's such a respected woman. She seems so caring." "That's a mask," Dorothy said sharply. "Do you know what she really does? All her public activities are just a cover. Patricia Webb, deputy chair of the city housing department." I froze, holding my cold cup. Housing department. The place where all property transactions are registered, where all the files are kept, where all the official stamps are placed. "She has access to all the databases," Dorothy concluded, her voice sounding like a verdict. She has all the necessary forms, all the stamps, and all the authority to make any fake contract look like a perfectly legal document. She can make it look like your apartment never belonged to you, and no one will believe you because she is the power. Dorothy's words hung in the air of the small, dimly lit kitchen. Housing department. Deputy chair. Every detail that had seemed strange or suspicious before now fit together, forming an outrageous but perfectly logical picture. The obedient behavior of the restaurant manager, Patricia Webb's calm confidence in front of the neighbors, the perfectly filled-out notarized contract that appeared from her folder. All of it was not coincidence but links in a chain forged in the corridors of power. So that's how it is, I whispered into the void. This is the perfect crime. Exactly, Dorothy nodded, her face even more sunken. She has everything. Power, reputation, access to documents. She can create any paper, confirm any lie. And Marcus is her handsome cover, her tool. He finds lonely women with property. He gains their trust. And then it's just technique. Her technique. I stood up and started pacing the kitchen. The passive despair that had held me prisoner in the hostel was gone. It was replaced by a cold, ringing anger. I had been betrayed, used, thrown out of my own life like a useless thing, and all with a smile on their faces in front of everyone while I myself was framed as the guilty one. We have to go to the police, I said, stopping suddenly. We have to tell them everything. Sarah's story, my story. They have to listen to us. They will listen to us, Dorothy replied bitterly. They'll write everything down in a report and then they'll make an inquiry where? To the city housing department to check the authenticity of your apartment documents. And do you know what answer they will get? They'll get an official response with a signature and a stamp that citizen Maya Torres voluntarily, in sound mind and full awareness, sold her apartment to citizen Patricia Webb, and they will attach a certified copy of the contract. They will dismiss all your words as lies about a respected public official. At best they will just wave us away. At worst they will open a case against you. Every word from Dorothy was a nail hammered into the coffin of my hopes. She was right. Against an official document our words counted for nothing. We were just two women, one crazy with grief, the other an unstable crazy person. So we need proof, I pressed. Solid proof. Something they can't deny. Something that proves these are not isolated incidents but a system. Where are we going to get that? Dorothy sighed. She has all the documents. All the threads lead to her. I sat back down at the table. Thought. Had to think. Ooh, who could help me? Someone close but not part of this nightmare. And only one name came up in my mind. Kelly. Kelly Jenkins. My assistant. My friend from the flower shop. Kelly was quiet, even a little shy, but she was an honest and decent person. She had known me for many years. She certainly wouldn't believe the nonsense about a nervous breakdown and bill collectors. Maybe she could find something out, hear something. After all, Marcus had often stopped by the shop. Maybe he had said something when I wasn't around. Every little thing, every detail could be a clue. That was the only chance. I have to meet someone, I said decisively. My co-worker Kelly. That's dangerous, sweetheart. Dorothy shook her head. They might be watching your friends, the shop. I'll be careful, I promised. I'll call her from your phone and arrange a meeting in a quiet spot. She's my only hope. She dialed Kelly's number. Kelly answered almost immediately. Her voice sounded worried. Maya, thank goodness. What happened? Your Marcus was here this morning looking for you, saying you ran away from home, that you were unwell. I was so worried. Kelly, I'm fine. I urgently need to talk to you. It's a matter of life and death. But please, not a word to anyone. Can you meet me in an hour somewhere? In the park behind the market. Yes, of course, Kelly answered without hesitation. I'll be there. An hour later, in Dorothy's old coat and with a scarf tied around my head to make me harder to recognize, I stepped onto the street. I decided to take a slight detour to the meeting place past my shop. I wanted to at least catch a glimpse of my little world, which I had also lost. As I got close to the familiar street, I saw something unusual from far away. A small crowd, 10 to 15 people, stood at the entrance to my shop. I saw a car with the logo of a local newspaper. Beside it stood a photographer with a large camera. My heart squeezed painfully. I moved closer, hiding behind the onlookers, and saw something that made me feel sick. In the center of the crowd, under the camera flashes, stood Patricia Webb. She wasn't wearing house clothes but a severe business suit with a perfect hairstyle. She was giving an interview. Beside her stood a young journalist with a notepad. She spoke in her typical voice, the voice of a public figure concerned about the city's well-being. "That's why working with the citizens is so important," she was saying. "We at the housing department try to be closer to people, to solve their urgent problems. Take for instance this wonderful flower shop here. We help small businesses. We support business owners." I listened to this nonsense and couldn't believe my ears. She had come here to my shop to put on a show against the backdrop of my misfortune. What bold fake behavior. And right then Patricia Webb seemed to sense my gaze. She looked up and saw me directly through the crowd. Her eyes narrowed for just a tiny second, but immediately a wide, joyful smile appeared on her face. "Maya, my dear, thank goodness," she cried out loudly across the street, walking directly toward me, pushing the crowd apart. I froze like a rabbit before a snake. It was too late to run. Patricia came very close and grabbed my hands. Her grip was again iron. She turned me to face the journalist and photographer. "Look, there's our runaway. We were so worried," she said, her voice trembling with real relief. "Maya, please come home. Stop listening to that poor grief-stricken old woman who is confused. Marcus has forgiven you everything. He's not mad that you took the money. We understand everything. You're under stress. We will help you." It was a devastating blow. In one fell swoop, in front of witnesses and the press, she painted me as a thief who had stolen from her own husband, as an unstable person who had fallen under the influence of a crazy old lady. A whisper started in the crowd. The journalist quickly wrote something in his pad. The photographer clicked the camera, capturing the scene. The respectable official and the disheveled, frantic-looking Maya. Right then the shop owner, Peter Walsh, stepped out of the flower shop door. He saw the scene, saw the reporters, and heard Patricia Webb's words about the stolen money. His face turned red. "Torres," he roared, walking toward me. "What are you doing here?" A scene in front of my shop, dragging my name through the dirt next to theft in the newspapers. "You're fired. I never want to see you here again. Understood?" He roughly grabbed me by the shoulder and pushed me aside. Away from the entrance, away from the cameras. "Get out of here, lady," he yelled, turning to Patricia. "Sort out your family problems somewhere else." I staggered from the shove. The humiliation was complete. I had lost everything. My home, my money, my reputation, and now my job. I stood in the middle of the street, crushed and dishonored, and the people around me looked at me with hate and pity. I was pushed out of the crowd. A man roughly said, "Don't stand in the way." And right then, as I passed the pale, deathly white Kelly, who was standing right in front of the entrance, Kelly made a quick, hard-to-see movement. She slid something cold and metal into my hand and quickly squeezed my fingers shut. "I'm so sorry," Kelly whispered so quietly she could barely be understood. Her eyes were full of horror. "My cousin works as a cleaner at the housing department. She gave me this just in case. Patricia is terribly paranoid. She keeps everything real in her office. She has a personal blue notebook there. Beg you, Maya. Don't tell anyone where you got this." Overwhelmed, I opened my hand. Inside was a key. An ordinary metal office door key. The cold metal of the key dug into my palm. I stood in the middle of the sidewalk, and the world around me broke into disconnected pieces. My boss's angry face, the clicking of the camera, the pitiful, scornful glances of the passers-by who were already walking away, losing interest in someone else's suffering. Patricia Webb, having fulfilled her task, majestically climbed into the waiting black government car. I closed my fist, hiding the key. I turned and walked away, not paying attention to my path. I wasn't running. I didn't have the strength for that anymore. I walked quickly, almost marching, forcing myself forward, away from this place of total humiliation. In my ears Kelly's whisper still rang. Blue notebook. Don't tell anyone. I returned to Dorothy an hour later, wandering through backyards and dark alleys like a real criminal. When I entered the apartment, I went silently into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my fist. The key fell onto the tablecloth with a dull thud. Dorothy looked first at the key, then at my deathly pale face. What is that? It's a key, I replied hoarsely, to her office at the housing department. I told her everything that had happened in front of the shop, about the reporters, the public accusation of theft, the firing, and Kelly's desperate whisper. Dorothy took the key in her wrinkled hand, weighing it in her palm. Her eyes, usually filled with quiet grief, shone with a hard, determined fire. The blue notebook, she repeated Kelly's words. If it exists, that's our only chance. Everything must be in there. Names, addresses, dates, proof. But how do we get in? Yes. They won't let us in. And even if they did, what would we do? We can't get in during the day, Dorothy said firmly. So we go at night. Flinch. Breaking into the housing department at night. Dorothy Mills, that's crazy. They'll catch us. And then what? And then what, sweetheart? Dorothy interrupted me. What more can they take from you? They took your home. They took your money, your job, and your good name. They took my daughter. We have nothing left to lose. This key is our last card in this game. And if we don't play it now, it might be too late tomorrow. They won't leave you alone. Now that they've started the press smear campaign, they'll find you. She was right. After today's show for the journalists, they wouldn't stop. They would corner me, put me in a mental hospital, or there would be another accident. Fine, I nodded, a cold resolve filling me. We go tonight. They spent the rest of the day in tense planning. Dorothy got an old but detailed city map from the cupboard, and they studied the location of the housing department. It was a massive gray building from the 1950s, taking up an entire block. An impossible fortress. But Kelly had said her cousin worked there as a cleaner, meaning the building had to have a service entrance that the staff used. And the nighttime cleaning had to start late in the evening when all the employees had left. They waited until 11 at night. The city grew quiet. They put on dark, hard-to-notice clothes. I put the key in my pocket, and it reminded me like an icy weight of the craziness of what we were doing. They walked, avoiding well-lit streets. The housing department building looked even scarier at night than during the day. A dark giant with rarely lit windows on the upper floors. They circled it and, as expected, found a hard-to-notice metal door in the inner courtyard. Trash bins stood next to it. They hid in the shadows and watched. Around midnight, two women in work clothes came to the door. They were smoking and talking, and one of them wedged the door open with a brick so it wouldn't close, and disappeared around the corner, probably to her work area. That was their chance. My heart pounded like crazy. Dorothy and I exchanged glances, slipped out of the shadows, and darted through the open door. Inside, a long, dimly lit hallway that smelled of cleaner awaited them. The hum of a floor polisher could be heard somewhere at the end. On tiptoes they moved in the opposite direction toward the central part of the building. The hallways were empty and echoed. Every step they took created a sound. They passed endless doors with signs. Department of Property Rights. Legal Department. Archives. Patricia Webb's office was on the 3rd floor. The sign on the door read, Webb, Patricia, Deputy Chair. Pulled out the key. My hands shook so much that I didn't hit the keyhole right away. I held my breath and turned the key. There was a quiet, almost silent click. They stepped inside and firmly closed the door behind them. The office was perfect. Not just tidy but absolutely perfect, like something in a magazine. A huge polished desk of dark wood on which there was not a single speck of dust. An expensive leather chair. Perfectly straight stacks of paper on the edge of the table. A pencil holder with sharply sharpened pencils. No personal items, no family photos. Just cold, flawless order. Search, Dorothy whispered. They began the search quietly, careful not to make a single sound. I tackled the desk drawers. Everything was in its place. Folders with official documents, office supplies, a notebook written in clean, fine handwriting. Nothing resembling a blue notebook. Dorothy checked the massive bookcase. On the shelves were law books, collections of rules, reference books. No secret books, no hidden spots. 20 minutes passed. Their despair grew. Had Kelly been wrong, or did Patricia keep it somewhere else? Dorothy walked over to the wall opposite the desk, annoyed, and tapped lightly on it with her knuckles. "Hollow. Empty," she whispered in frustration. I looked up and saw that wall. It was Patricia Webb's wall of fame. It was covered in awards, thank you notes, and framed photos. Here she shook the mayor's hand. Here she spoke at a forum. Here she received an award for her perfect service. And then I noticed a detail that only the eye of a florist used to perfect balance and arrangement harmony could notice. One of the photos, the largest one, in which Patricia Webb stood next to the county leader, hung ever so slightly crooked, literally by a few tiny bits. In this realm of perfectionism, such a small thing seemed impossible. "Wait," I said, walking to the wall. I reached out my hand and instead of just straightening the frame, I took it with both hands and pulled lightly. And I felt the frame give way with a faint click. It wasn't a photo. It was a door. The door to a small safe built into the wall. Dorothy gasped. The safe was small and had a combination lock, a round dial with numbers. "The code," Dorothy breathed. "We'll never crack that." But I wasn't listening. I looked at the wall next to the safe. There, among other awards, hung a heavy bronze award in a frame. City Housing Department, founded in the year 1955. Paranoid people, as Kelly had said, didn't use random numbers. They used something they would never forget. What could be more important to Patricia Webb, whose entire life was built around this place, than the founding date? I reached for the dial. My fingers slowly turned the knob with clicking sounds. 1, 3, 5, 5. Inside something clicked dully. I pulled the small handle. The heavy metal door gave way and opened silently. Inside, on the single shelf, lay a small but thick blue notebook in a sturdy blue cover, completely blank. I took it out with trembling hands and placed it on the table. I opened the first page. My breath caught. This was more than just proof. It was a verdict. The book was neatly divided into columns. Property address. Operator. Status. In the operator column the same name was written everywhere. Webb MJ. The first entry. The second. Third. Under number 3 I saw a familiar address. The address of Sarah, Dorothy's daughter. Small studio apartment. In the notes column it was short and cold. Accident. Property realized. I frantically flipped through. A fourth entry. A fifth. A sixth. A seventh. There were 8 in total. 8 apartments. 8 marriages or business agreements with Marcus. 8 fates next to which were notes. Vanished without a trace. Overdose. Traffic accident. And all of this was sealed with copies of documents certified with the housing department stamp and his mother's signature. The last entry, number 8, was mine. Torres M. Address of my parents' apartment. And in the status column, in neat handwriting, it said, "In progress." Those 2 words, written in even emotionless handwriting, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I was just an unfinished item on a to-do list. My life, my home, my future. All of it. Dorothy looked over my shoulder. She saw her daughter's name, the short note about the accident, and a quiet, held-back sound escaped her chest. She swayed, and I had to steady her. "Easy, Dorothy Mills, take it easy," I whispered, although the ground was giving way beneath my own feet. "We found it. We found what we were looking for. We need to act fast. Take the book." "Crazy. They'll notice it's missing immediately. We need to copy it. The whole thing front to back." "The phone," commanded myself. I pulled my old smartphone from my bag. The screen had been cracked 6 months ago and the battery was almost dead, but the camera worked. I turned it on and feverishly began to photograph the contents of the blue notebook page by page. My hands trembled so much that some shots were blurry. I had to repeat them. The click of the camera in the dead silence of the office seemed incredibly loud. Dorothy stood next to me, holding onto my shoulder, staring intently at the pages where the fate of her daughter and 7 other unfortunates was recorded. "Faster, sweetheart, faster," she whispered. I turned another page. Blick. Another one. Blick. I was already halfway through when both of them froze, hearing a sound that made the blood run cold in their veins. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. Not the steps of a night cleaner. They were fast, confident male steps, and they were coming directly toward their door. I rushed to the table, grabbed the blue notebook to push it back into the safe, but it was already too late. The key turned in the lock. The door flew open. Standing on the threshold was Marcus. He wasn't wearing the expensive suit from the restaurant but a simple black sweater and jeans, but he didn't look any less dangerous. On the contrary, without the polish and charm, he looked like a hunter. His eyes burned with cold anger. He wasn't alone. Peeking anxiously from behind his shoulder was Kelly. Her face was wet with tears, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry, Maya," she cried, her voice breaking into a sob. "I'm so sorry. They found out about my cousin, the cleaner. They threatened my whole family. I didn't mean to." Marcus roughly shoved her aside, and she stumbled and fell to her knees in the hallway where she continued to weep. He stepped into the office. His eyes darted around the room. He saw Dorothy, then me, and then the open safe in the wall and the blue notebook on the table. All his control, all his charm, all his mask fell away in a second. Standing before them was no caring husband, no respected businessman. Standing before them was a cornered, furious animal. "You!" he hissed, and there was so much hatred in that word that I instinctively took a step back. "You 2 old women ruined everything. Everything." He lunged forward, not at Dorothy but at me. I was the one holding the phone with the evidence. He wanted to grab it from me. Destroy it. Erase it. He was strong and fast. He grabbed my wrist and twisted it with such force that I screamed in pain. The phone flew onto the floor. With his other hand he buried his fingers in my hair. "You'll regret the day you were born," he snarled directly into my face. And right then what he hadn't expected at all happened. The quiet, frail old woman, Dorothy, who barely seemed able to stand, turned into a fury. There was no fear on her face, only wild motherly rage over her destroyed daughter. She grabbed the heavy glass water pitcher from the table and slammed it with all her might onto Marcus's head. There was a dull, wet thud. The glass didn't break, but the blow was terrible. Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. The grip in my hair loosened. He staggered and crashed onto the carpet like a sack, releasing my arm. "Run!" Dorothy screamed, grabbing my arm. I, beside myself with shock, bent down, snatched the phone from the floor, and rushed out of the office with Dorothy. They ran past Kelly, who was weeping in the hallway and didn't even raise her head. "Security!" They heard Marcus's hoarse cry behind them. He was already coming too. "3rd floor. Stop them!" They rushed toward the staircase. Just down." They ran, leaping over steps. Their footsteps echoed loudly in the night silence. From above they could already hear the pounding of multiple feet. They ran to the 1st floor, to the main exit. Huge glass doors that were always open during the day. But now a heavy chain and a padlock hung on them. They were trapped. Behind them screams were already heard from the stairs. "They're here. Block all exits." "This way," Dorothy gasped, pulling me by the sleeve. She pushed me toward a hard-to-notice door under the stairs. A sign hung on it. "Utility closet." The door was unlocked. They stumbled inside into the narrow closet crowded with buckets and mops. Smelled like dampness and chemicals. What now?" I whispered, trying to catch my breath. In the hallway the pounding of feet could already be heard. They were very close. Dorothy looked at me with a long, deep gaze. There was neither fear nor hatred in her eyes, only firm, icy determination. "Now, sweetheart, you do what I tell you," she said quietly but authoritatively. She grabbed me by the shoulders. "They're looking for the blue notebook and those who saw it. But the proof is on your phone. You are the only proof." She turned me around and forcefully shoved me back into the closet. Then she followed, positioning herself between me and the approaching security guards. "I'll hold them off," she said without turning around. "No," I screamed. "Dorothy Mills, don't do this." But Dorothy, as if she hadn't heard, shoved me into the closet again. "Tomorrow at noon sharp there's a forum at the Civic Center auditorium. His mother will receive an award there. Go there. Go and show everyone what you have on your phone. I'm buying you time." And before I could reply, Dorothy slammed the closet door shut. There was a click of the old rusty lock that she had turned from the outside. I rushed to the door, beginning to hit it with my fists. "Open up, Dorothy Mills. Open up." But in response I only heard the approaching footsteps and Marcus's voice full of rage. "She's in here. Grab her." "Where's the other one?" I pressed my eye to the keyhole. I saw the two huge security guards rushing toward Dorothy. She stood in the middle of the hallway, small, petite, but with her head held high, looking directly into the eyes of Marcus, who was holding his head. "Where is she?" he snarled. Dorothy remained silent. He signaled to the security guards. They roughly grabbed her by the arms and dragged her toward the exit. She didn't resist. She only turned her head for a second toward the closet, and I thought I saw her wink. And I was left alone, locked in the dark utility closet, helpless, while I heard the steps of my only friend and my enemy walking away. I spent the entire night on the floor in the cold, dark closet. I didn't cry. The tears had dried up. Inside there was only a burned-out desert, in the middle of which stood an icy tower of rage and determination. Again and again I repeated Dorothy's words in my head. "Go there. Show everyone." It wasn't just a farewell. It was a command, a legacy. Dorothy had sacrificed her freedom, perhaps even her life, to give me this chance. And I had no right to waste it. I pressed the phone to myself as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. In it, in that small piece of plastic and glass, the lives and deaths of 8 people were stored. In it lay my only hope for justice. In the early morning, when the gray sky behind the small barred window near the ceiling grew lighter, footsteps were heard in the hallway. The early shift of cleaners arrived. They talked loudly, clattering buckets. I heard someone trying to open the door to my closet. "Locked again," a woman's voice grumbled. "What's with this? This lock keeps sticking." "Oh well, let's open it later." She waited until 8 o'clock when the building began to fill with employees. First a murmur of voices, the tapping of heels. She waited another half hour until the main flow of people had calmed down, and then she made her decision. She tapped lightly on the door. No one answered. Then she knocked harder. "Hello, is anyone there? Open up." Behind the door, footsteps were heard. Then a mutter and the grinding of a key in the lock. The cleaner from before opened the door. When she saw me, disheveled and with bags under my eyes, she stepped back in shock. Who are you? How did you get in here?" "Got locked in by accident," I tossed out, and without giving the cleaner time to think, I slipped into the hallway and walked quickly toward the exit. No one paid attention to me. In the morning rush of the offices, everyone was busy with their own business. I stepped out onto the street. Freedom. But I had no strength to feel joy. I knew that Dorothy had most likely already been taken to the police, accused of attacking Marcus, perhaps even more. And Patricia Webb remained untouchable. Today she would be center stage, accepting an award as a pillar of the community. This thought gave me strength. I had only a few hours left. Ran. And I didn't hide. I began to act. First I went to the nearest coffee shop and ordered the cheapest coffee just to get access to an outlet. My phone battery was almost dead. While it charged, I searched the internet for information about today's forum. Everything was as Dorothy had said. The Civic Center auditorium. Starting at 12 o'clock. Ceremony for outstanding service to the city. The mayor was the main guest. The award recipient, Patricia Webb. The next step was the evidence. Storing it only on an old phone was too risky. I found the nearest print shop that offered printing services. With a portion of Dorothy's money, I had every page of the blue notebook printed on glossy paper. Clear, large, so that every letter, every number, every signature was visible. I made 5 sets. Then I made the most important call. In Dorothy's notebook, which she had left on the kitchen table, I found the number of her nephew. Called. "Hello, you don't know me," I began quickly when I heard the man's voice. "My name is Maya. I'm a friend of Dorothy Mills." Someone gasped on the other end of the line. I continued without giving him a chance to say a word. "I don't have time for explanations, but I know what happened to Sarah. I have proof. Today at 12 o'clock at the Civic Center auditorium there's an event. I will be there. Please come and bring the largest portrait of Sarah you have. And do you remember if Dorothy ever told you about other families, about people who also lost relatives after they came into contact with Marcus Webb? If you know anyone, call them. Tell them to come too." I hung up without waiting for an answer. I had done everything I could. Now all that was left was to go through with it. Just before noon I approached the Civic Center auditorium. Expensive cars were parked outside the entrance. Journalists swarmed around. Inside, in the huge hall with red velvet seats, there were hardly any free seats left. An orchestra was playing. On the stage the mayor and other important officials sat on the platform, and among them, in an elegant, bright suit, sat Patricia Webb. She smiled kindly, nodding to acquaintances in the hall. I tucked the folders with the printouts into my bag. My appearance was terrible. Disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes from the day before, a bruise on my cheekbone where Marcus had grabbed me. I was the living picture of a victim going into her final battle. I entered the hall. The usher at the entrance tried to stop me, but I simply walked past him, my gaze fixed straight ahead. I walked down the center aisle directly toward the stage. The music stopped. People in the hall began to turn around, staring in shock at the strange, ragged woman disturbing the seriousness of the moment. Patricia Webb saw me too. The smile on her face froze, turning into an icy mask. She whispered something to the security guard at the edge of the stage. 2 strong men in suits immediately stepped into my path, blocking my passage. "Ma'am, you can't go through here," one of them said roughly, blocking my way. "Stop." I was 30 feet from the stage. The whole hall was looking at me. I opened my mouth to scream, to say at least something before I was thrown out, but someone beat me to it. In the first row, right in front of the stage, a man suddenly stood up. He wore a simple worker's jacket. I didn't recognize him right away. "Let her through," he said loudly to the hall, talking to the security guards. "Let her speak. That's my sister." The man took a step forward, placing himself between me and the guards. He wasn't looking at me but directly into the eyes of Patricia Webb, who was sitting on the stage. His voice trembled with held-back anger. "The apartment of my sister is also listed in that blue notebook." The mechanic's words echoed in the deafening silence like a gunshot. He wasn't screaming. He said it calmly, with heavy, painfully gained conviction, and that made his words even more powerful. For a moment there was absolute, deadly silence in the huge hall. The orchestra froze with instruments raised. The journalists who had been filming the platform suddenly turned their cameras onto the man in the worker's jacket. The security guards blocking my way stood undecided. Their order was not to let the crazy woman through. But now I wasn't just crazy. I had a witness. The mayor on the stage looked at Patricia Webb with confusion, waiting for an explanation. But the face of the community pillar had turned to stone. The icy mask of control cracked, revealing raw animal fury underneath. She understood that the situation was spinning out of control. I needed exactly that second of delay. I took a step, went around the frozen security guards, then another. I wasn't running. I was walking. I walked down the center aisle toward the stage, and every step I took echoed in the following silence. Hundreds of eyes followed me. This disheveled woman in wrinkled clothes who was walking toward the city's most powerful person. "Grab her," Patricia finally came to. Her voice, usually so calm and authoritative, was sharp and piercing. "Get her out of the hall immediately." The security guards flinched, preparing to do the command, but it was already too late. I had climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The master of ceremonies, a startled young man, backed away from his podium. I walked over, took the heavy, cold microphone in my hand, and turned to the hall. In the first row I saw Marcus. He jumped up from his seat. A white bandage flashed under the hair on his head, the result of Dorothy's glass pitcher. His face was twisted with hate. "She's crazy," he screamed, drowning out the murmur that arose in the hall. "She needs treatment. She stole money from us and is now talking nonsense. Call the police." The police. That was exactly what I wanted. I brought the microphone to my lips and took a deep breath. My voice, amplified by the loudspeakers, boomed through the vault of the huge hall. "My name is Maya Torres." I paused so everyone could hear and remember my name. 2 weeks ago I married this man. I nodded toward Marcus. And yesterday he, along with his mother, the respected Patricia Webb, threw me out of my own apartment. The apartment I supposedly sold to her myself. An indignant uproar arose in the hall. Patricia Webb leaped up from her seat on the platform. "This is lies, slander," she screamed. "I will sue." "You certainly will," I replied calmly. I raised one of the folders I was holding. "They called me a thief, a crazy person. And this," I held up the printed sheet so everyone could see the columns and numbers. "This is the real list of your service to the city, Mrs. Webb. Your list of properties." I didn't wait for a reaction. I began to read slowly, clearly, so that every word reached everyone in the hall. Number 1. James Harrison, born 1948. Vanished without a trace in 2019. His 2-bedroom apartment on Goethe Street was inherited by a distant relative and then sold. Operator of the transaction, Webb Marcus. The mechanic standing in the aisle clenched his fists. "That's my sister," he said dully, and the people around him backed away. I turned the page. Number 2. Samantha Green, born 1977. Died in a traffic accident in 2020. Her studio apartment on Peace Avenue went by will to her partner, Webb Marcus. I looked up. There was dead silence in the hall. Everyone listened, holding their breath. Journalists pushed each other aside and rushed toward the stage, clicking their cameras. Number 3. Sarah Jones, born 1988. I paused and my voice trembled. Drowned. Accident in the year 2021. 1 month after marrying. I couldn't finish speaking. At that moment the back doors of the hall flew open with a crash, and people appeared in the aisle. Dorothy's nephew and several others. And over their heads they carried a large black framed portrait of a young smiling woman with huge bright eyes. From the portrait Sarah Jones looked out at the entire silent hall. A cry of horror and pity went through the hall. It was no longer just a list of names. The tragedy had a face. "That's my cousin," Dorothy's nephew screamed, his voice breaking. "And our aunt, her mother, was arrested yesterday for trying to save this woman." He pointed to me. And then the hall erupted into chaos. People were standing up everywhere. "Michael Baker." "That's my brother," shouted a woman from the back rows. "The Wilsons." Those were our neighbors. "They moved out so suddenly," someone nearby whispered. There was complete pandemonium. People were shouting, pointing fingers at the stage, at the frozen Patricia and the staggering Marcus in the aisle. The reputation that Patricia Webb had built over decades crumbled to ashes in 5 minutes. Her name, which had been a synonym for respect and honor, was now being dragged through the mud. The mayor, deathly pale, realized he was sitting on a stage with a monster. This scandal could bury his career too. He suddenly turned to the chief of city police, who was also sitting in full dress uniform on the platform, and said something authoritative, waving his hand toward Webb. I saw all this as if through a veil. I had fulfilled my task. I had taken revenge for Sarah, for Dorothy, for myself, and for 7 other people I didn't know. I lowered the microphone. Police officers were already making their way to the stage. They pushed the journalists aside, forming a corridor. I descended from the stage and walked toward the commanding officer. Silently, without a single word, I handed him one of the folders with all the printouts of the pages from the blue notebook. "Everything is here," I said quietly. "Names, addresses, dates. And I have the photos of the originals on my phone." The officer took the folder and quickly flipped through the pages. His face grew darker with each sheet. He looked up at me, then at the stage, and gave a command to his subordinates. I stepped aside, leaning against the wall, and watched the end of this nightmare. I saw 2 police officers approaching Patricia Webb. She yelled at them, waving some kind of ID, talking about her connections. But that didn't work anymore. One of the officers calmly took her arm and put handcuffs on her. The second did the same with her other arm. The community pillar had become an ordinary arrested person. Marcus was caught in the aisle when he tried to break through to the exit. He wasn't so calm. He snarled, pulled away, shouting bad words. But he was quickly overpowered and also led toward the exit, dragged across the carpet. As they were being led out of the hall, Patricia Webb looked at me one last time. In her eyes there was neither power nor confidence, only pure, helpless hatred. I stood leaning against the wall, watching the door close behind my enemies. It was all over. Dorothy's nephew approached me. "Thank you," he simply said, "for what you did for her, for all of us." I only nodded silently. The next day Dorothy was released. All charges against her were dropped. A week later, after the intervention of the district attorney's office, all of the Webb's property transactions were declared null and void. I got my apartment back. I entered it alone. Inside it still smelled foreign, of fried fish and cheap air freshener. I tore open all the windows, let the fresh wind rush in. And then I did what I did best. I went to my flower shop. The owner himself had called me, apologizing so much and begging me to come back. I returned with arms full of white roses, eucalyptus, and baby's breath. Back at home I turned on music and set to work. I sorted the flowers, trimmed the stems, arranged huge cleansing bouquets. And with every flower my hands placed in a vase, I felt all the dirt, the pain, and the fear leaving from my home, from my life, leaving behind only purity, light, and hope. I had reclaimed my home. I had reclaimed my life. That is an incredibly tense story, dear listeners. A story that honestly still leaves you feeling a bit uneasy. It's about how fragile our happiness can be and how important it is to find the strength not to give up when the whole world collapses, but to stand up for yourself. You sit there and ask yourself, did Maya do the right thing? Was it right to go up against an entire system like that alone, risking the last thing she had, her freedom and her life? Was there perhaps another safer way? But which one? If the very people who are supposed to protect the law are breaking it themselves, how would you have acted in her place? Would you have shown the same courage? And how do you judge Dorothy's act? She deliberately put herself in the hands of those criminals, sacrificing herself to buy Maya time and a chance for justice. Was such a sacrifice justified? I would be extremely interested to read your thoughts on this. Perhaps you have questions or interesting observations about this story. Something that seemed particularly important to you or something you completely disagree with. Please don't hesitate to write everything you think in the comments under this video. Let's discuss it together. And of course, if this story captivated you, if you were rooting for the heroines until the end, I would be very grateful if you leave a like, subscribe to JAMAL'S Stories, and share your opinion in the comments. Your support is the most important thing to us. I wish that you only encounter honest and good people on your path and that you never have to face such deceit. All the best. At the end of this video, a small window will appear in the center of the screen. Please click on it. There you will find our other most exciting stories. Please consider that creating this type of content requires time, effort, and care to provide you with captivating and high-quality stories like this one. If you like my work and want JAMAL'S Stories to continue publishing exciting narratives like this, I would greatly appreciate a small donation. Every contribution helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for your generosity. I walked out of that auditorium with my hands still shaking. But for the first time in days I could breathe again. Everything I'd been through, the fear, the humiliation, the moments when I thought my life was over, brought me to one simple truth. Sometimes the people who smile the widest hide the darkest intentions. And sometimes the smallest act of courage, even when you feel broken, is enough to turn everything around. If you're listening to me right now and you're going through something that feels impossible, I want you to remember this. You are stronger than the trap you're in. And there is always a way out. Always. Hope has a way of finding those who refuse to let go. If you agree with me and enjoyed my story, show it with a like. Let's see how many we are. And I'm curious, what city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Tell me in the comments. If you want to help me keep sharing these emotional, gripping stories every day, even a small donation truly keeps the channel alive. For more life stories like this, feel free to explore my other videos and subscribe. On your screen you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Just click one and dive right in. Love to you all.